Hello, fellow Sublime Text fanatics. Welcome to Sublime Text Live, episode number, I don't remember. I have to look over here. 102. Hey, check it out. My goodness. It has been a heck of a week since the last Sublime Text Live stream here. Hang on a second while I adjust my chair because my dog was being a little bit of a poopy. He's back to sleeping and giving me the glares. Hello, everybody. Info create. The question that you asked in the chat is there a debugger in Sublime? And the answer to that question is no. Natively, Sublime doesn't have debugging support built in the way that some IDEs do. But in the Sublime Text way, you can have debuggers that are provided by packages. One of those would be this one here. There's a couple of other ones. I think this is the preeminent one, if you will. Sort of in the same way that LSP for Code Intelligence talks to some sort of external server, and LSP stands for Language Server Protocol, for being able to connect an editor to some sort of backend server that provides code intelligence for a wide variety of languages. This particular package uses something called DAP, or the Debugger Adapter Protocol, or Debug Adapter Protocol, which does the same sort of thing. I've never used it myself. I'm not sure how well it may or may not work for any particular language. The stuff that I do doesn't tend to be helped most of the time by a debugger. So it's been a long while since I've done anything in a debug capacity with an actual debugger. And when I do, I normally just use GDB and do stuff from inside of GDB's interface. That hopefully will answer your question. There may be other debugger packages. I'm not aware of them. I think this is the one that people generally talk about when they talk about debuggers in Sublime. So yeah, what we're going to be doing tonight, once we make sure that everything seems to be stable and working, because occasionally YouTube's a little bit of a bad boy when it comes to keeping streams stable, is answer any questions that you might have, such as the debug question that we just had there. And also, I have a repository on GitHub in the Stealthy and Hasty GitHub organization, which is a couple of Sublime Text ninjas, me and Keith Hall, who's also a member of the Sublime Text community. And in there, I have a repository called Sublime Scraps that has a variety of plugins and the like. And I thought we could maybe go through some of those, because it's been sort of a long-standing task on the to-do list to create some pull requests to add some new plugins into that as examples for things, and also maybe revamp some of the existing samples in there as well to bring them sort of up to date. Not that they won't work the way that they are already in there, for the most part, as far as I'm aware anyway, but just that there are some of them that have been in there since my early days of using Sublime Text, and now I know a lot more about how things work. So there's potentially some better ways to get stuff working than what is currently in there. But of course, as is always the case, if you have any questions about anything Sublime Text related or otherwise, feel free to drop those in the chat while we're going along through here. I think if that little graph could be shown to me, it seems like it's probably going all cool. Yeah, that's what we want to see. We want to see that part. Hello, Mike. Welcome. I'm just about to press the magic button, but first I'm getting one little stretch in here. Things are going not too shabby. We're still in crunch time at work, but I think we're sort of easing out of the tail end of it, so things aren't quite as red hot, diamond pressure forming as they were last week. Thank goodness. That sort of stuff is sort of it's really wearing for an extended period of time. All right, we're gonna jump in. We're gonna press the button, and here we are. So just before the stream started, someone asked Info Create, does Sublime Text have a debugger. Is there one built in? No. Is there packages for it? Yes. There's this one, which I personally have never used, but it speaks the debug adapter protocol. So if you can find a debugger that speaks that particular language, this is sort of the interface that you could expect to see in here, which is pretty impressive because Sublime doesn't really have the ability to generate ad hoc GUI things. So this is actually some fairly sophisticated HTML that's being manipulated, as far as I'm aware, which is, you say, people seem to really like this. You can even see some of the things that are available in here. So LLDB would be for C and the like, I would imagine, and Node. So yeah, we might even play with this in another stream. But so I threw a link to that up above there as well. And let's scroll down to thus. Hello, Ben. Welcome to the stream. We're going to be going over some old-timey plugins and cringing at stuff, and of course answering questions. Let's see, on a new project, trying to figure out why a Windows service isn't calling. Fun times. Is there any problem that being remote can't solve? Any pro tips for working with large text files like logs? I mean, if you use Sublime Text 4, if you have a very large log file, it'll automatically load significantly faster because it won't have syntax highlighting. Once files are open, it should be fairly performant, I would think, unless you have like lots of long lines. Most of the time, anything that I do with a log file generally involves searching and the like. Chances are good I would probably do something from the terminal before I would just load a ginormous log file directly into something. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but in my particular use cases for stuff, logs that we have are rather robust, if you will, as far as the amount of stuff that they put in them and how much stuff they generate. So probably you could take advantage of doing stuff directly with Sublime. Like, let's see, is there a test file here? Like you might say, for example, oh, this is not sized appropriately, pardon me. If we were to cat this, we could see, you know, I don't think I have any actual log files that I can show here, but, you know, you could do something like grep for main in test.c and pipe it to subtle minus, and then all the logs that are related to the thing that you're interested in will just pop directly in and be, you know, a smaller thing than a gigantic thing. Wow. If you have to use the event viewer, then life is generally the sad. You can get less for Windows. Let's see. I can't remember what the thing is actually called. Oh, my eyes. This is probably not the thing. But I have a package that I have installed on all my Windows machines except for the one that happens to be sitting next to me, and I can't remember exactly where I got it from. You choose something like Unix Tools, Windows, because there's like a, oh, might even be this one, as a matter of fact. Let's click some various action. Ports of common GNU libraries to native stuff. So this might be something to look at if you're doing something like that. Following programs are covered: BC, Bison, bzip, diffutils, fileutils, find, flex, awk, grep, which is one of the main reasons that I have it in here. Make, patch, man, sed, shell utils. I would imagine one of these is probably less, if I had to imagine, because I know I got it from somewhere. the one that I've had for a very long time, apparently. But for a similar reason, I tend to work in Linux most of the time. I'll throw this well, is there a... Was that going to load too, or no? Otherwise, I won't bother. But the general gist of things is, yeah, there are versions of stuff, but normally, as Ben suggests there, I would probably do something terminal related myself. And for Windows, I tend to have the standard tools that I'm most used to using, a ported version of them available there. And in a pinch, all my systems are networked together in a way that I could quickly drop a file onto a file share and then use a Linux box to drill down in some more. Windows Event Viewer is like the bane of my existence whenever I work on services, so I feel your pain on that one. I tried to add Terminal or Terminus on Windows, but I just messed it up. You can certainly ask a question about that. It's pretty straightforward to install Terminus if you would like to do so. Generally speaking, you can just install it directly from package control and everything should just come directly in all on its own. What particular problem did you have? Yeah, that's true. If you have a production server, our production servers, you know how you're probably unhappy that everything you're doing is through an R desktop server, which automatically makes everything slower and harder to do than it would be otherwise? Our production servers are locked behind 2 layers of that. You have to R desktop to a jump server from which you R desktop to the actual final version of things. I try as best as I can to never have to do anything with that particular production environment. So Tommy, I'm not sure which way I'm assuming Tommy. What you can do is let's see here. If I quit that and go to a terminal, we can do something like this. Sublime Text, Linux, Sublime Text, build 40. What's the latest build? 4112? Whoops. From a fresh installation, I guess I should probably quit all of the copies of that if I want that to do a thing. Do I have extra? I do have extra windows somewhere, don't I? Oh, right. Never mind. Forgot what I was doing there for a second. And it's a dev build. All right, well, we don't want to fiddle with that then. What's the latest? Yeah. Oh, double harsh. Yeah. What's the latest stable version of Sublime? I don't actually know what the number of that is off the top of my head. Let's go check the download page here, because I do not want to have to fiddle with 4113. How do I not have 4113? Oh, that's a bit of a oversight on my part. I have a question for you, Ben. Since there are plans to update the dialog box for updates to let you know what is coming in the new build, is something going to change in Linux builds of text to actually display that too? Even though under Linux machines, it's usually the package manager that's responsible for doing that. I mean, that right now, what we just get is a box that says there's a new version installed, a new version available. Would you like to download it? And it takes you to the download page. Yeah, I set the, sorry about the, there's maybe some potential latency here. I set the latency of the stream to low, but not ultra low, because on ultra low, it seems to really have a problem with throughput in a way that Twitch doesn't for the exact same bitrate and recording size, which is extremely confusing. We're going to take a brief hiatus on the terminus question for just a moment to go to Sublime Text and move home downloads to there. To there. That'll do some stuff. Awesome. I figured that would probably be the case, but I guess the tricky part is when you actually get to see. Twitch is definitely, I think, better for streaming right now. Although have heard various people say that it's probably going to be overtaken by YouTube because YouTube is more about actually trying to innovate on their platform in a way that Twitch is not. I'm not in much of a position to say too much about that one way or the other based on my limited experience with using Twitch. I will say that the experience of streaming on Twitch is a lot friendlier. There's a lot more community there, more ability for people to support the channel if they'd like to. Like, for example, here on YouTube, you could support me if I was willing to turn on channel memberships, but the way that it's structured, I'm not sure that there's a value added proposition that I'm in a position to provide right now, since I still have a regular day job and other stuff that I do. So let's see. That's 4113. Okay, so that was a little bit of a digression there, because I'm usually very Johnny on the spot with having every possible version of Sublime Text just laying around. Let's make sure we make a data directory here. So this is the latest stable version of Sublime Text 4, which is 100% bone stock, not even registered in any way, shape, or form here. I'm not really into potentially leaking my license key by trying to put that in play while I'm live on a stream. But so this is completely bone stock, you know, like even if we went into settings, there are no settings available whatsoever. So what you can do is say install package control. Now package control is installed. You can say install package, wait for the list of packages to download. I've seen articles about the Steam Deck, but I haven't actually looked into one in any detail. My take on it just from looking at it is that it's sort of like a computer in a Nintendo Switch form factor, but I didn't look into it in any great detail. If you could play like Linux games and the like on it, that would be pretty handy indeed. But I haven't looked too much into it yet because I'm pretty sure that grabby hands would be sad about the whole thing. Now I've used package control. I'm just going to pick Terminus as the package to install here. And that should be pretty much it. There wasn't any sort of message or anything. But we can now say open default shell in panel. And here is a bash shell just down here in the bottom. So that should be as simple as it is to install Terminus in Sublime Text. There's nothing really complicated about it at all. If there's a problem that you're having with that, then we can talk you through that. Multiple occurrences of variable A and AB. I want to select all occurrences of A. Find all doesn't work because it selects from variable AB. I was going to say, what is SteamOS? It's like a Linux of some sort, right? KDE on a Steam Deck? My goodness. Well, I got to say, what I would probably do in a case like that is something like what you just mentioned there. Let's see. We need a sample something to look at here. Where are the plugins at? I guess they're in this folder called plugins. That's probably a bad example of that. Let's see. For, let's say, whoops, JavaScript, for example. Oh, well, welcome to the screen. Am I pronouncing your name right? Is it Tommy, or is it Tommy, or something different than that? Again, I apologize if I don't say anybody's name correctly. I'm doing my best. So if you have multiple occurrences of variables a and ab, and you want to select all occurrences of a, find all doesn't work because it'll select from variables. Well, there's a couple of things that we could do here. So let's say we had a function Bob, and we had var a equals 12 and var ab equals 13, and then a plus a, var c equals a plus ab plus ab plus a plus a plus ab plus a, like this. And you wanted to rename the variable a's. Well, you could do this. Open the find replace panel, make sure that regular expression is turned on, and then you can do this. The /b's make it stop at a word boundary, and that'll make sure that it only finds only the instances of the word a without any instances of the word ab. And then you could replace a's with c's, for example, and click replace all, and those will all swap and the ab's will remain in there. It's probably how I would do something like that. If you're unsure about it, you could, instead of, the button's kind of below my head here, but there's a replace button that would take that operation once at a time. So you could say replace that one, and then replace that one, and then make sure that as you're going through it that you're hitting the things that you expect. If that, because this would find all of the letter A's everywhere in this particular case, right? So if there was a comment that was a couple of variables in this particular example, then that would replace that one too. So you'd have to take care with that. And you can get really, as complicated as you need with a regular expression most of the time. But that's the first thing. That's the first thing that comes to mind. Although I would probably myself do it this way: a boop, 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 and then go with it that way. Then I could be absolutely certain that everything I'm doing is the correct thing. And that also gives you the easy ability to say, I want this one, I want this one, I don't want this one. Whoops, I'm doing that all week. I don't want this one. I don't want this one, but I want this one and this one. Sorry. My fingers are all discombobulated, and then you could modify some of them, but not all of them. But on the whole, I would recommend the regular expression part. You could put a /b on either end of this if you wanted to. So instead of wrapping it all the way, you could search for this, and then it'll find all instances of the letter A that end the letter. But again, probably for a variable, for safety's sake, you want to do a little something like that, I would think. Does that help you, Tommy, to get stuff up and running for Terminus? The confusing part may be that you expect it to display something, but as we saw, it doesn't really display anything when that happens. It's just installed and good to go. So if I go back to that folder again, I should really update this version of it to be the most recent version too. There would be options for it in the command palette if it's installed. There'll be items under preferences, package settings. You'll see one for Terminus to allow you to set settings for it. If this worked, if you try to do the like terminus panel and you don't see something appear down in this thing that looks like it's actually working the way that this one is, then use view show console. That'll show you this console window and you can see if there's any error messages in there that would point to a particular problem. But yeah, on the whole, should be pretty seamless. Let's see. Hello, Ayush. Welcome to the stream. How are you doing this fine morning? And hello, world. Glad I could be of some assistance there. Hopefully that is helpful. I've been pondering the sorts of things, and you guys can, chime in on this. I'm trying to keep the channel as focused as possible on the particular topic at hand, which is Sublime Text and Sublime related things. How to use the editor, how to, create plugins, how to create packages, how to install packages and plugins. Coming soon, Sublime Merge stuff. It is coming because it's in the same adjacency. It is part of the Merge video series. I want to do a couple of videos on just sort of, like Git terminology and using Git for beginners, because I want to have something to be able to refer to in the Merge videos. Now, the question about this is, I sometimes get asked questions like, please provide make a video on keyboard, like shortcuts in Sublime Text. And I have done that for things like the stuff that we were just seeing a moment ago, like Control-K, Control-D to quick select all instances of a word, or, skipping over one and going to the next one and the like. But what I haven't really created any videos on are just sort of the standards of text editors in general. Things that come to mind in here, because it's been asked a couple of times recently, is the idea that the insert key changes the cursor from something that types over to something that inserts inside, and other operations like that. Things that are less Sublime Text specific and more just sort of tutorials for computing, for software on the whole. I can see a need for that because people are asking the questions, but it's kind of outside of the focus of the channel. But that's definitely something that we could throw videos up for if that's the sort of thing that you guys think would be useful and a good fit for the content on the channel. So let me know what you think about that. Also, the next few videos for the channel here, unless something untoward happens, are going to be continuing on the video that was released yesterday on build systems and how to get the most out of them. There are some videos on the channel about that already. They're a couple years old at this point, still fully serviceable, but they're longer videos. And I wanted to refresh and update the content because I have better lights, I have a better camera, I have a better stream setup in general, etc. And redo those videos with an eye towards not having them be so information dense so that it's easier to pick and choose what you'd like to see. That's what's going to be coming next. After that, could be Sublime Merge videos, could be a similar treatment for color schemes, maybe even themes as well, which isn't something that we've actually covered too much on the channel. But there's some things to look forward to. The Vintage package has a lot of features like jumping to lines. Is it possible with regular Windows without? Is it possible to jump to a line? Yeah, you can push Control G and just jump directly there. For example, Control G 50, and now we're on line 50. That is under the Go To menu here. There's one for Go To line. That's where that comes from. But also Go To Anything will also do that, which is something that we covered in one of the videos. But if you use Go To Anything, it shows you a list of all files, and you could pick one. And then once you have a file picked, you could type :50 and X. Whoops. you could type some stuff and actually go there, theoretically. That doesn't seem to be working right now. That's interesting. Oh yeah, I guess I probably got to do something like that, right? Yeah, my bad. One of those things you can do. So yeah, Control G will jump you there directly. There's another version of that. I'm not sure where exactly it lives. This is something that we would have to plunk through the menu to see if it's even in the menu. It might not be. Let's see. But there's a version of that that actually prompts you for the file name in a panel at the bottom of the window, similar to what Vintage does. Let's see. Whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. So look at the main menu and look for Go To. It's going to just be those, right? Yeah, okay. There's a command called go to line that will also do a similar thing, which you could bind to a key. I don't think there's one bundled by default, but we can see. Let's see. Default Linux key, for example. There is not. If you were to actually run this, is that how we're going to play that? Sorry. Prompt go to line. My bad. Window run command. I forgot. It's a twofer. This particular command will ask you for something in the item here. You can type 19 and jump to line 19. One of the things that this actually nets you that other things don't have is, I believe, you can say -10, and then it'll jump you to the 10th line from the bottom of the file, which could potentially be useful. The way this is two commands, so this one will actually jump to a specific location, but you have to tell it, and this one will actually ask you. I don't think there's a binding for it by default, so you'd have to create one of those yourself. Like Control Shift H for prompt go to line, and then Control Shift H. I must have another version of that somewhere. Hang on. There we go. I can't remember why I have that one in there, but nevertheless. Control Shift H would allow you to, jump to, say, line 35, to jump to line 35, or I want to go 50 lines from the bottom of the file and jump there. And of course you could add this to the command palette as well, if that was your druthers. So there's a couple of ways that you could do that. Or you could create your own plugin that does the same thing as well. I am a longtime Vim user, but I like to keep key bindings and such for the tools that they're meant to be for. Or if you will, it doesn't seem like a good fit to me to try to use keys that I would normally use in Vim in other applications. It's just a personal preference of mine. I know my coworker, the first thing he does is try to set himself up with Vim key bindings, but I try to keep my head in Vim or not in Vim, basically. So, yeah, there's nothing too earth-shattering about that particular decision on my part. That's just how I work that. I would recommend, though, if you want to have Vim support or VI support in Sublime, that you check out the Neo Vintages package. Give me my focus. This particular package is, I think, the preeminent Vim emulation for Sublime if you want that sort of thing. I believe it far exceeds anything that Vintage can do, because I don't think Vintage has had much of a facelift in the last few years. Possibly because packages like Neo-Vintagious and Vintagious are packages that exist that do the same thing better, or are more actively developed by the community. It's probably a better way to say that. The other thing that I was going to take a look at today is this. So I have this whoops, pardon my misclick. I meant to click here. This is the repository that I'm looking in right now, should anybody be interested in following along with this. But there's a variety of things in here, and some of them are plugins. And I thought we would take a look at this to see if there is any of these that we think should be enhanced in some fashion. And at the very least, I think the things in build enhancements could probably be better handled in this case. Done with setting up Vim and Emacs since they're mind busters. Yeah, I tend to find that over the years that I used Vim, I still use Vim as an editor, just not as much as I used to, but I do like a lot of server stuff, which fortunately for me, more often than not, unlike poor Mike, as we discovered earlier, is actually a Linux server that we would connect to, and not a rushing nesting doll level of consistent remote desktops for Windows. And in those sorts of situations, Vim is my primary editing tool. And at times, sometimes when I'm in the console, if I need to quickly edit a file, I would just edit it directly from here and set stuff up. So I still use it, not as much as I used to, because I used to use it for everything. Now I use Sublime for pretty much everything. But over the course of all the time that I used Vim, I was very slowly building up my vimrc to the key bindings that I found most useful and the settings that I found most useful and the like. And I find that once you get that, you very carefully shepherd it from machine to machine to machine. So the very first thing I do when I set up a new Linux machine is mirror up my vimrc and viminfo files and the .vim directory with all of the various things that I have in here. I send those up to a machine first thing, and then second thing is doing this and this, because some Linux distributions will link VI to not Vim by default. They'll link it to like Vile or Nano or other editors, and that's not how I play. I want this to be Vim. And then with those two things in play, then I can start setting up the remainder of my system as I see fit. I also tend to recompile my own Vim. I don't think I did it this time, so that the capital X command for encrypting something doesn't work. Because that tends to want to encrypt your file, and I do not want to accidentally encrypt a file when I didn't mean to, because I get into that situation where you do this, accidentally hold down the X too long, you hit the key, you think you're typing the next shell command, but actually you're typing a password that's encrypting your file, and then life is the unhappy. Is there a thing up here? I don't think that I did it on this machine. Probably not, based on when that was compiled. Possibly could have been. Maybe I did. No, it's in user bin. I didn't do it this time. Solarized color scheme. Yeah. My Vim colors are mostly set up to look proper in this particular color scheme. for stuff. So they look slightly different in the terminal that I have now. But this is generally how I expect this sort of thing to look. Things tend to not look quite like that in the other terminal that I use, like in this one. The not quite as blue as it could be otherwise. But yeah, I believe this is a solarized color scheme of some sort here. Can't even remember offhand. This is another one of those things that I set one time a long time ago and then haven't fiddled with since. I may have chosen a particular palette for this thing. Nevertheless. Okay. So let's take a look at this thing. This is an example of creating. How are we doing this here? Yeah. This is one of those things that is, if you wanted to create yourself a custom build target, specifically because when you're working with a Sublime build file, you want to have your own keys in there. This is an example of how you could do something like that. And I would probably do this a little bit differently now as compared to how this is laid out. So in this particular example, and again, this is in that repository that I linked if you want to see this stuff. There's an example of a build system that would actually use this. So you would specify as the target my custom build, because that's the name that this command implements. And then this is the thing that I don't really like about this. You would specify command here, and this code will actually replace command with CMD. There's another, perhaps a better way to do that than this that makes it more of a drop-in replacement for stuff, which over the years that I've used Sublime, I used to favor one way, and now I favor the alternate way. The general gist of this problem goes something like this. If we had a new build system and we had our own custom target in it, like say we had a command named Bob, and we wanted to do something to create our own custom variable. Here are the example custom variable is named this. This is the variable that would be used. And say we wanted to use that in our little make line here. We change this to echo and do this. So what we might expect is that the command Bob is executed, and Bob is this command that gets this variable, and it goes through all of this work to populate and expand the text for this into some particular value. And when it actually happens, it turns out that the file ends up looking like this. And the reason for that is that in the command, the shell command, and the working dir fields in the Sublime build system, all variables are automatically expanded before the target command is actually executed, which is a convenience because most of the time you're going to want to take advantage of these variables, but you don't want to have to constantly write the code, the boilerplate that's required in order to make that work. So Sublime does that for you on the way in. What that means, though, is that it expands every variable, even ones it doesn't know what the values of them are, and any variable that it doesn't know what the value is, it just assumes it's an empty string. So in the original version of this plugin, the idea is that you would use command in this thing and specify it this way. Let's just go ahead and let's see. We'll give it a better syntax highlighting here using package dev. This is how this particular plugin does it, and as it's reading the arguments that it gets, it expands this out into, like, say, the text hello or something, and then it replaces this with CMD, and this is what actually gets executed, which totally works, but as we can see here, it's not very pleasing that it's not giving us the good syntax highlighting, because maybe there's a couple of things in here. Maybe we want to have $file and that, but it's not telling us that there's any appropriate syntax available for that, right? But if this was shell command, then we can totally see that this is actually a variable. It makes this command easier to read. What you can do is this instead of the other thing, and then when this JSON is parsed, // becomes /$. As it gets passed through the command interpreter to actually execute the build, this gets replaced with this without actually expanding the variable. Then your command gets executed. It has this variable field in the name, or in it directly, and it can just expand it. So you do need to do a little bit of extra stuff when you're putting the custom variable in, but I think that makes for a better experience overall for this entire operation. Before we go too much farther, I'm pretty sure that this is out of date. Whoops. Yeah, GitHub is ahead of this one. Oops. I meant that one. That's right, that one's not the default, pardon me. There have been some changes to this in this short interim. Important to make sure that everything's completely up to date. So what we could actually do is customize this in a little bit of a well, actually in a couple of different ways. So let's see. An example of how to customize a build system to do what you want them to do. In this example, provide the ability to specify our own custom build variable for cases where the ones built into Sublime aren't enough. For this to work, you need to specify the target is this command, specify the command to execute this command, not necessarily what we want, and of course provide the settings that you want to expand, such as in your project or in a plugin. That's something that's just sort of glossed over here. There's also an explanation of the thing that I just said here. When Sublime executes the build, it does an expansion of variables that it supports internally before it runs your command, and any variables that exist will have that it doesn't know about will have their default text set to the empty string. So those variables will just vanish themselves out, which is why that it works the way that it does. The idea behind this is that this would actually get the settings from a particular place when it's actually running this particular command. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to copy this, and we're going to say new plugin, and paste it and call it custom build variables. So now I have a version of this in my user package, and everything seems to work. And in order to test this, we also need a build system. So this would be, the target would be called my custom build, right? Is that what I called that? Yeah. Let's close the other version of this file here for the time being. That's that one, right? Yeah, we don't want to accidentally modify that one until it's time. So this would be called my custom build. Like this as that part, and then we could totally use this as a variable, but we have to use command, and then let's throw that in there. That's what that was actually called, right? So we call this test build, for example. Now go up to this menu and set test build as the build system that we're using to make sure that nothing happens here. So when I push this key, we're going to play that. Oh, right. I can't do it that way, can I? Because it's replacing it with command. Yeah. Pardon me. Let's tweak this up a little bit. I favor build systems that use shell command over build systems that use command, because it just seems more native and natural to be able to type exactly what I would type in the terminal as opposed to this business where we have to specify all of the values individually. And now we can see it echoing the name of the file and the project variable. And in this particular case, it should look like this. So nothing happens for that. But if we, oops, pardon me. Let's look at the plugin code. That's the, oh my goodness. Let me just scooch my chair up here. It's still a little warm in here. I'm sticking to the chair slightly. Here's an example of this working. If there was a preference that was inside of a project, and I don't think there's a project here. Oh, maybe there is. So there's settings that actually apply to this. We make sure we don't check these in. If this was this, then by the rules of project-specific settings, this setting is automatically applied to every file that's open inside of this window. So we could say view settings get proj var 1 and see the value of it there. And that's where this code is getting stuff from as well. It's getting the view settings from the active view and calling view settings get thus. So now if I was to run this build, we can see it seeing the name of the file, and then it says this is a project specific setting. So this build is actually doing what we would expect it to do in this particular case. We've created something that actually takes this project specific setting and applies it. This could actually be made a lot nicer. And the one thing that we would do is put this back to be shell command, for example. Well, actually, for our purposes here, let's leave it as command instead. And this is the bit where if I run this again, it's unhappy about this in this particular case because of what the plugin is actually trying to do. It replaced command with nothing, which doesn't make this a particularly good example for that particular case. So let's take a look at what this is actually doing and rework it. So get the project specific settings. So it needs to get the project data out of the current window. Technically, it doesn't actually need to do, as we just saw. This is an example of me not realizing early on that there were easier ways to do this sort of thing. Unless they had a very specific reason for this. You could set them in, if you set them in your project specific settings, it'll apply to all files. You can also have syntax specific settings, which I believe trump project specific settings, which would also be something that you could do. So I don't think we technically want to do that. Let's just double check the documentation on that. And take a look. I believe my eyes I want to make sure that I'm remembering that correctly. So the defaults, platform defaults, your preferences, first the project, then syntax specific settings, then your specific settings, and then buffer specific settings, right? So the theory is if you put settings in the project, which we did here, they automatically get applied to every view, as we just saw. If you ask this view for this setting, this is what happens here. That part happens first. So the setting could be inside of your preferences file. If it's not there, then it could be inside of the project settings, or sorry, in your user preferences rather. That's what I said, right? Yeah. You could put it in your preferences and it would apply to all files everywhere. You could put it in your project settings as we did here, and then it'll only apply to files inside that project. And if you put it in both of these places, then this is the global for everywhere, and you could override it on a project-specific basis, which is an important thing. And then if there was syntax-specific settings, the one that you're mostly interested in is this one because it's ones that you set up, then you could change it again. So you could say, globally, I want the setting to be this, but in certain projects, I want it to be this, and also in Python files, I want it to be this. And then this last one here is one that a plugin would generally be the thing to set stuff up, except for very specific settings. Like, for example, these options here to change the rulers to specific things, those are examples of buffer specific settings that'll only modify the settings for this file and not for all files. So I'm going to just jump that over there for the time being because we don't need to look at it. So do we need project specific settings and project settings and view settings? I don't think we do. We just need to get the settings object for the currently active window. We get the list of variables from up there. It's nothing that we actually really need to do anymore for what we're actually going to try to do here. We would just say this. In a list of variables, I guess we probably should declare that, huh? Maybe we leave that part in place. Oh yeah, I guess we did that a slightly different way, did we? Okay. We could probably do a little thing like, well, let's do it this way first. Variables, custom variables is get thus. That's all you need to do. In all of the arguments that we got, expand the variables. And we also need to boost this code out of here a little bit too, because this is the part that's actually going to happen. We would do a little bit something like this. From the default package, import, too much JavaScript lately. From the default packages exec file, import exec command. And then down here, my custom build is a subclass of exec command, like this. And then we could say super.run keyword arguments. I believe we put the stars in here. That's the part that always messes me up. This part here is the part that we bring down. Well, I guess all of those are the parts that we bring down. Like this. This part doesn't even need to be here anymore. I suspect that part doesn't either. I think you only need the global to actually write to a thing. I can never remember. I do it very infrequently. Get view specific settings. View settings get custom var, and then kw keyword args is equal to sublime.expand variables. Do a quick little check that the first argument is the value and the second argument is the variables. So we will put keyword arguments and variables here. And if we did that, and this was set to command, theoretically this would do something. Let's see what happens. Let's see how much of this I forgot. Okay. All right, what did I do wrong there? Oops. Open the repository for the, oh, that part. That one's not actually in there. All right. Let's take a look here. Where? Oh, because I was iterating over them. Right. Okay. I guess I probably do still need that part. That would do more like what we expect. So now it's not currently doing anything, and that's because of the thing that we mentioned previously, which is that this needs to become this. And now this just works with command, or this could be shell command, and this could be a string in a way that we might more comfortably expect to be able to type it, and it still works. So I think this is a much cleaner example of something like this. Taking advantage of a few different things. One, that the exec command is something that is already used to execute builds and knows absolutely everything that it knows how to do, which is why previously we were just invoking the exec command, but instead of doing that, we can just subclass it directly and not even have to do any of that stuff. We're going to replace this. I think this would be CMD, thusly. That part will still be okay. So let's see. In this example, provide the ability to specify our own custom build variables for cases where the ones built into Sublime are not enough. For this to work, you need to specify the target is this command. Specify the, okay, yeah. Specify the command to execute. No. And of course, provide the settings you want to expand, like so. Boop. An example might be this. Okay. Remember that Sublime. Okay, I'm sorry. How do we say this best? Shell command and working dir before it invokes your custom command target. And then we just say your global preferences, project specific settings, syntax specific settings, buffer. Something similar to this. That's giving an example of where those are going to come from. I just want to check, is this actually needed for that to work? No, I didn't think so. So let's just take that part out. It's going to get the view settings. Maybe we even shorten this up by just changing this to be settings, like so. And we are good to go. Now, what this is actually doing is creating a dictionary where the keys are variables and the values are the values of said variables. And all of the work for this is done in this sublime.expand variables key. Okay, so we would say something similar to that. So the nice thing about this is you might think that this is sort of a complicated thing to do, getting these variables to expand out in the build the way that Sublime does it, but actually that functionality is built completely into the API, as you can see here. This is extra cool because what you pass it is some value, thus, and that dictionary of variables where the keys are variable names and the values are the values of those particular variables. And when you invoke this, Sublime will return you a copy of the variable with a copy of the value, sorry, with all of the values expanded. You can pass in, say, a string, and it will just expand it there. If you pass in an array, it'll automatically iterate over all of the array, duplicating everything and expanding keys, and similar for dictionaries. So it's literally a one-line call to take all of the values and just expand them out in the arguments, which makes this very nice indeed. So it's probably where we're at with that, right? Just go ahead and we'll leave that there for the time being. We'll know. So this is an example of a very simple custom build that would allow you, if you wanted to have your own custom values. And of course, these values could come from anywhere. They don't necessarily have to come from a preference. That was just what this particular user wanted. Because you're writing Python code, you could get this from anywhere. You could pull these from environment variables or configuration files or the like, which maybe even might be a better way to do something like that. But if you say you had you wanted to always generate an executable with your project's name in it and not necessarily the name of the file, then you could easily, on a project by project basis, include this magic variable here and have all of your build systems that generate files just use it, and then all of them will just automatically create the file no matter what project you're in, as an example. What's the next one in the list here? I'm going to take this version of it and just move it over there so we don't need to worry about it. And I'm going to delete that one. We don't need that one for right now. Let's see. Shebanger and that one. I imagine this is going to have some similar type stuff. Oh, maybe not. This one might be something that's just sort of okay on its own. Normally in a Sublime build, you need to specify the program to run to execute the build directly. This is how you could do something like that, so it gets the name of the executable to build things out of the script itself. So the idea of this particular command, if I am understanding this correctly, is that this one's specifically for Python, if I recall correctly. Pardon me. In this example here. What this is actually doing is finding shebang lines as the first line in a file and passing them back. So this is another example of something that could be used in a slightly different way, similar to this one, where we subclass the exec command to do this. This one similarly could also do that. So that's probably a thing that we would actually want to tweak here. So let's copy this, close it, new plugin, we'll name it Shebanger, like so. And then again, the first thing you're going to put in here is from default exec, import exec command. Did I do that? No. Then we can swap this down here to be exec command. And we would do that, but maybe we would have the appropriate levels of indent. So modify the version of Python used to be the one listed. So the idea here is that you would use you would set in the build what you think the defaults for these things should be, which again has its own little default. And then it will simulate the shell command for you so that you don't have to do anything special with it. So this part should still be here. This is opening the file, reading the first line, splitting it on spaces. And we want to make sure that we only do something with shebang lines. This part, all of this, comes down here. So this part doesn't need to be here anymore. This could be empty, so this should actually be or this, so that if you try to build something in a file that hasn't been saved to disk, you end up with an empty string instead of an error. I don't think we need any of that action. These should be keyword args. Take the interpreter default out of the argument, defaulting it to Python. Take the interpreter args out of the default, defaulting it to that. Parse the shebang out of the file here. And then it's going to generate its own shell command and to do something with it. So let's give this a little bit of a sample. So in order to do this, we would need, let's say, all of this. I don't think we technically do, but for our test purposes, let's remove the variant like so. So this build looks like it should be valid. We'll call this shebanger, not a William Hung song, and set the build again to be shebanger like so. And remember, as I said in yesterday's video, build systems appear in the menu based on the name of the file that they're created for, which is why I always recommend, if you take advice to duplicate the Python build system to modify it, always make sure you rename it as something that's not Python. Otherwise, the same name will appear twice in the folder or in the list, and it makes it tricky for you to figure out which one is the one that you're actually supposed to be using. So this particular build is going to assume, normally it would automatically take effect in Python files, but because we've set the build system specifically to it, this is the only build that this is going to try to do something with. So if I try to execute this thing right now, it's going to default to trying to run it with Python and probably get very mad about it indeed. And we can see exactly the shell command that it executed, which is python -u and the name of this build file, which is, you know, not what we might like for something like this. But we could do something like this. User bin python 3 -u, for example. Syntax highlighting done like this because this isn't a Python file. But if we execute this build, we broke it, I guess. Right, I guess we have to do that in an actual Python file. Bummer. I should have saw that one coming. Now it's trying to run user bin python 3 and it doesn't work. If this was userbon python 3, then it doesn't work because userbon python 3 isn't actively a thing. If I removed those, we can see that the command it's trying to execute is now using -u by default because that's what's here. The arguments that you get required to be specified on that line. And now it's should that not have done something? Let's take a look at the actual code. There could potentially be a bug in this one. Let's fix this. Yeah, it's better. Oh, I guess it wasn't getting those from the shebang line. It was getting them from the arguments. All right. That's my bad. I forgot how the thing actually works. So yeah, you would need to specify those in the build system and not here. But the idea here is that this file could be set to run with Python 3, or it could be set to run with Python 2, and then it would be one build system that would automatically select the appropriate version of the system based on that. Theoretically, this could be a little bit smarter and actually pull the arguments out of the shebang line instead of from the build. But I think the reason I didn't do that originally, it's coming back to me now, is because you might want more control over that and not have to specify them multiple times. Also, parts of these plugins are meant to be exercises to the reader, because they're just meant to be illustrative examples of how you could do stuff like this without necessarily requiring you to, have it be the be-all and end-all of all possible code paths. On the whole, that should work exactly as one might like. So if we wanted to, we could specify, in this particular file, we would specify the thing there. We could specify that. Yeah, I think that's cool. So let's delete this one. And we'll just plop that one over there, because we'll set some stuff up. Now the last one of these, I'm not sure. This is just the same method, only the idea is that the build system holds the possible list of interpreters, and the first line is formatted to allow the build to select. In this example, it's for selecting between 32-bit and 64-bit versions of Python, but it could easily be modified to select between different versions of Python operating for different languages, etc. So here the target's Python build. You specify, pardon me, the Python 32-bit and 64-bit items here. And let's see. This one is assuming that the file starts with a comment that tells it which thing to do. So let's see. First of all, hello, Ashwin. Welcome to the stream. How is your morning going? We are going over some of the plugins in the build, in this particular case, in the build enhancements in the scraps repository, because I think some of them should be updated to be a little bit nicer than what they currently are. And then combined with some other stuff that needs to be added to this repository so that I can get them out of my user package. This one's named Python build, so let's close that. Create a new plugin. New plugin, thank you. Say this as Python build. For example, there's a few things about this that we want to modify. One is you can tell whereabouts in my Python, well, not that one. Whereabouts in my Python career I was when I wrote this, because historically I've preferred having a space between a thing and the parentheses, but Python doesn't, well, not that Python doesn't like that, but it doesn't seem to be the standard way that Python code is written, so I swapped how that works over time. I know the feeling, sir. I've had a lot of that going on. Although I will say, I tweeted out and put a post on the channel to let people know that possibly yesterday's video was going to be late, because I derped up a little bit while I was doing recording. I didn't set stuff up correctly, and the main microphone cut out, and instead of providing a warning, I accidentally set things such that it just automatically cut over to a backup microphone which wasn't connected at the time, so it used the laptop built-in microphone, which is objectively worse than the audio that records with the footage coming directly out of the camcorder. Now, I set up that tweet and the post because I had to re-record a bunch of stuff to make sure that the audio quality was at the highest level that I could provide. I didn't want to try to use just backup audio for everything that doesn't really sound that good, and I was afraid that was going to take a long period of time and the video was going to be late, but actually it didn't. It went rather quickly, generally, I suppose, because that's the sort of thing that is a little bit easier the second time around. Let's go do the same thing to this one as you did with the other two, which is from default exec. Oops. Import exec command. Yeah, that's my coworker prefers that. Where's an example of that? Well, I guess thus. He would do stuff like this. This is something that was sort of the hot button topic between us for years. My preference for doing stuff for a long time was we put a space between this and the parentheses that follow it, and his was no, the parentheses have to butt up, but there needs to be a space around it so that you can distinctly see the arguments. But now I'm in a position where I don't put any space there at all. It's always comma space here. It's not bunked up like that. That just looks wrong to me. But it's funny, but I think this is my supposition on this. Habits like that derive from using editors in the past that didn't have syntax highlighting the way that we have it now. Maybe because it was very simplistic, or maybe because it was not present at all, depending on the particular situation. And in the case like that, you want to try to write the code in a way that it's easier for your eyes to parse it as your gaze falls down the page in a little waterfall. But with syntax highlighting, particularly good semantic syntax highlighting, then that becomes less of an issue, I think. It's my guess anyway. So we swap this to be exec command. Fun fact, I was actually pondering creating a key binding specific to JavaScript and TypeScript, such that in those files using a squiggle brace would not only wrap but also insert a space around it, so that when you're doing an import or require that uses that destructuring syntax or other things that use destructuring syntax, it would just automatically work. And then before I got to it, I was pondering, this is a thing that I should do. It occurred to me that I would have to make it very clever context-wise, because this is also the construct you use to use format strings in those languages. Whoops. Okay. And again, all of this stuff goes down here. We don't need any of that business. We don't need that either. All the instances of args become keyword args like this. And again, we'll just copy this line because it's easier. That could well be the case. At the time, everything that I was doing was Vim related. I don't have a ton of experience with that. We did make some tweaks to some things, but I don't know that it has the same, or at least at that point, way back when, that it has the same capabilities in the same way. One thing to say is that the way that it's implemented, it's a little bit easier to do some things. For example, in our C code, we wanted our code to be as portable as possible, because the server code that we write in Objective-C and C in Objective-C, which I've talked about many times across many different streams, right now runs only on Linux. But back in the day, we had it running on Linux boxes. We had it running on Windows under Yellow Box. We had it running on Spark machines. And we transitioned from 32-bit to 64-bit architectures. We also, for a brief period of time, had some parts of it running under VMS, which uses a different endian because of the hardware architecture than everything else, which caused no end of problems. Suffice it to say that when you're working in a code base like that, you want to be very careful about things. And like the size of an int or a long depends on the word size, which depends on the architecture. So on one machine it could be 64 bits, and on another machine it could be 32 bits, and vice versa. But the reason that we're using types is because we know that we need a very specific range of values. So on a 32-bit system you might need to say long int, whereas on a regular on a 64-bit machine you might just say int, and it would automatically be long. So we came up with our own type defs for built-in types that we knew would be a specific signedness and a specific number of bytes, so that anywhere we wanted to do something, we would know this needs to be a uint2 and this needs to be an int8, because we want this to be an 8-bit or an 8-byte unsigned or 8-bit signed integer, which isn't something that we pioneered by any stretch of the imagination. But suffice it to say, it's very easy in Vim syntax highlighting to add rules to highlight those particular types in the same way as the built-in ones. Up until recently, that was fairly tricky to do in Sublime, in as much as you'd have to augment the syntax in some fashion. That would mean creating an override. But now we have the extend functionality. That seems like it's probably a lot easier than it used to be. I have, of course, not actually tested that by any stretch of the imagination. So let's see, what do we have here? That's the current file, or one of those. The arguments to the command can have a Python 32 and a Python 64, which will default to values if they're not actually in the build. We call detect version for those things. It opens up the file that is provided. This could probably be tweaked in Shebanger as well. That's going to cause a problem if the file's not saved, but I think that's okay. At least for these specific examples anyway. It gets the file name, it gets those arguments out, it calls detect version, which opens the file, reads the first line, and if the line starts with a hash and contains 64, then it's going to return the 64-bit value, otherwise the 32-bit value. And then there's the part where it actually crams the stuff in to the arguments here. And this is also an example of something that could be made a little bit cooler as well, because we could, if we wanted to. This one is specific to Python, right? So we could say variables is equal to this, where a variable named $Python, if I could type, is set to the specific value of selected, or rather, I apologize. As I said, I also lacked a fair amount of sleep. Let's go ahead and do that. These things don't actually need to be here. These could also be inlined, but that starts to take things to a little bit of a level. And then we can say keyword args is equal to sublime.expand variables of keyword args. The actual variables are variables. And then this part doesn't need to be here. And this would work a little bit differently. That and that would be thus. Did I modify that over here? I did not. Let's bring this one back over for just a second. Oh yeah, that one we didn't need for that sort of thing. This tells it to select the version of either that version of Python or that version of Python. So let's say we set this to Python 32 and Python 64. You know, this particular thing is something that was specific to the guy that originally asked this question, or the person that originally asked this question. So should be enough. Maybe I'll add an equal sign there though, so that it actually compiles. That might be a thing to do. Okay, so that part's all good. So now's the part where we actually create a build system to do something like this. So let's see, we go bang, bang, bang. Whoops. New build, paste, save, and we'll call this Python build.sublime build. Now all the places where you want to execute Python, you just use //$python. So there can be one there and one there. Those are the lines. If we were to specify, whoops, pardon me, the build system for this to be the one that we just saved here, what do we actually call this one? Python build, like so. If I try to build this and choose that one, it's not executing anything there. Did we do something a little bit wrong here? What did we do incorrectly here, guys? This code should pull Python 32 and 64 out of those particular keys, defining it to something. There are the keys. It's popping them because exec will throw a major fit if you give it arguments that it doesn't understand. And it's popping them and giving a specific value. The value of this particular variable, probably name that correctly. There we go. So this one tried to execute Python because that was the fallback. Here's the thing where we would say Python 32, we run the build, and it tried to run the 32-bit version of Python. But if this said Python 64, then it's trying to run something that doesn't actually exist. So using this, it's an example of a way to control what the build system actually does based on the source file that is coming in. Imagine a build system that did something like this for C developers that want to use C single file, and they have like 100 different implementations of the build system because they sometimes want to compile it one way and sometimes with other arguments. You could shebang your C compiler arguments in here to get it to pluck those out too. The build system holds a possible list of interpreters, and the first line of the file is formatted to allow the build. Select 34. This example is for selecting between a 32-bit or 64-bit version of Python, but it can easily be modified to select between different versions of Python, operate on a different language, etc. A build file that looks something like this. The important parts are the target and the two different interpreters to use. Okay. This isn't marked down. Anywhere you want the in such, like so, and that will do the business. So again, if it doesn't have any item there, the one that it selects is Python 32. Otherwise, it selects the other one. So this one, did I get that backwards? I may have gotten the sense of that one a little bit. If the line, the first line, it's Python 64. Pardon me, I'm too much JavaScript. I'm telling you, too much Python 6. It's Python 64 if the line starts with a hash and has that. Now this is going to require it to not have any white space there either. So again, this is something that you could augment. You could regular expression match this to pluck exactly what you want out. But again, this isn't trying to be the be all and end all of all of this stuff. This is just a simple example. So now that one's good to go. And we don't need that build. And that's examples of all of these custom build targets, which is sort of fun because that's what we're covering on the channel currently. I think that was the bulk of the stuff that I wanted to take a look at. Double clicker still works just fine. Find results copy. I mean, I'm unhappy about the spacing on the brackets here and the parentheses, but I don't know that that's necessarily worth a PR. For code style reasons. My goodness. The coffee is not helping. This is an example. I tell this all the time. People say, why are you drinking coffee so late at night? You're going to be up all night. Caffeine does not affect me in a way that makes me wakeful. I can still sleep. All the other effects of caffeine still work on me though. Let's see. Generate command list. Yeah, no, that one's still cool. I believe we do have a fancier version of this, the browse command. Log toggler should possibly be modified because there's more than just these. There's more than just build systems and results and input and commands, because there's also one for frame rate, right? Is there another one that I'm missing? Oops. Build systems, index, control tree, result regex. There's a fair number of them. The nice thing about these, it's not implemented in the documentation just yet, but you don't have to provide a flag. If you don't, they'll just toggle. So this one requires you to know the state of all of these things to begin with, but that's not strictly necessary anymore. Because yeah. The question becomes, how useful are these that you might want to also do it for control tree and the like? Because there may be some action there that is interesting in that regard. Oh my goodness, guys. I am so sorry that I am feeling the extra bits of fatigue. I've been staying up rather later than normal recently due to the crunch time and trying to do a little bit of extra work, or put in a little bit of extra time after normal work hours to try to see us through this. And coffee's not helping. As such, we may call the stream in the next 10 minutes or so to get our 2 hours in there. And maybe this is my opportunity to go to bed and actually get a decent night's sleep for a change. Minimap toggler. I don't know that that's necessarily super interesting at this point. There's stuff in here that doesn't need to be in here anymore. It's probably an important thing. Because there's actually a way to fetch that now, and I don't know that anybody would want to support versions of Sublime Text prior to version 3.116, because that was a very long time ago. These ones are all simple example drop-in replacements for things. That one's one that we should be working on a little bit more. So, pardon me. Oh, nope. That one's probably cool too. Yeah. I think it's more or less all we're interested in there. Now, something that we do need to do is this. This is something that you've probably seen me use in these videos, or in videos and in these live streams. But scratch buffer prompt for syntax, and then you choose one, and then you get a scratch buffer of that type, and you can easily stub stuff out. Comes from this particular plugin. One of the things that we have planned for the channel is showing how to write something like this, and sort of going over this as an example briefly in the middle of a, I think the full-on idea we had was one long video that is, so you've created a plugin and you want to get it into package control. Here's an end-to-end how you do that, which is something that I think, well, it could be split up into a bunch of smaller videos. I think it's best experienced as one longer video, even if it takes like a half an hour or 45 minutes, because that's one of those things that people have questions about all the time, and it's the process as a whole and not one small part of it. But I think, based on the fact that I am feeling kind of fatigued, and we have fixed all of these plugins here, not these versions, but the versions that I have over there, which we can work on sending up along with a bunch of other things inside of a pull request. I think this is the point where we're going to call the stream here. And I apologize for being a little bit of a low energy. As I said, I've been working a lot of long hours lately. That is slowing down now. So hopefully, I mean, like last week, there wasn't a regular Twitch stream on Wednesday, but I did do one on Friday. There will be a Twitch stream tomorrow, same time as here. We'll be working on bot and Twitch and other code related things during that stream. So in that regard, things are more back to normal. But for other days where streams aren't normally done, I am working longer hours, which includes last night, and I stayed up a little bit later to do the video on the weekend as well. So I'm kind of feeling the effects on that, and I know that that sort of brings the energy level of the stream down, but I didn't want to miss another one because I love hanging out with you guys here in the streams. So that's going to do it for tonight. We're going to be on Twitch tomorrow and Friday working on stuff. We'll be back here on Tuesday working on some more plugin ideas and answering your questions. We might even work through the steps involved in creating that video on adding a package to package control. I do want to get that one done sooner rather than later. And actually, that involves tweaking up the scratch buffer plugin a little bit to use some newer features. I think we had some ideas for that, Ashwin pointed out. So we'll see you in the next stream. Until then, please have a sublime day. Your questions and support in the channel are, as always, approved. And I'm not entirely sure what the heck just happened there. But yeah, that button does not do what I think it normally does. So my apologies for that one. It actually works better than I thought it did. I've never actually done it that way before. So we're gonna jump on out of the stream now. Thank you everybody for hanging out. We'll see you in the next stream. Remember, if you have questions or ideas for plugins we can use in these streams, or that you would just like to see in general, down in the comment section in the Discord are great places to throw those sorts of things. This is places where I get ideas for these things from when I'm not busy bumping the microphone with my hand. Thanks to everybody for showing up tonight. And in the next stream, we'll see you. So please have a sublime day and night, depending on where you are in the world.